You don't hear the wind at -37. You feel it. It presses against your ribs, crawls under your jacket, and waits. That night, the snow didn't fall, it attacked. Every gust slammed against the cabin walls, and the wood answered with a cracking sound, like bones under pressure. Even the air inside had weight heavy with smoke and fear. I was 60 miles from town. No power, no signal, no backup, just a man. And a storm that wanted to erase him. The cold wasn't weather anymore. It was alive. It moved through the cracks, found my breath, sat right on my shoulder, and when the fire began to fade, I knew one thing. If I wanted to see morning, I'd have to remember what my ancestors knew. The wind didn't stop that night. It pressed harder. Each gust crawled down the chimney and shoved the smoke right back into my face. The cabin filled fast, heavy, dark, choking. The wood stove hissed like it was drowning. My eyes burned. My throat tore with each cough. I tried opening the door for air, but the wind screamed through it like a blade. For a moment, I just sat there, eyes watering, ears ringing. Then I remembered a line from an old survival book. The Tipi breathes. The cabin suffocates. I didn't understand it back then. That night I did. I stared at the ceiling, low, steep, trapped. Warm air was fighting to rise, but it had nowhere to go. So I grabbed my knife, climbed onto the stool, and cut a small vent near the ridge beam. A quick slice, then another. I stuffed the gap with fur and bark, leaving just enough room to let the air escape. Minutes later, the smoke shifted. It climbed, curled, and vanished through that small opening. Fresh air slid in near the floor. The cabin breathed. And so did I. I leaned back, feeling the air move around me, slow, alive. Not warm yet, but different. It wasn't fighting anymore. It was listening. That night, I learned something simple. Warmth isn't about fire. It's about flow. It's about giving your shelter a way to breathe. By the next night, the cabin felt smaller. The kind of small that comes when the wind won't stop talking. It pushed, rattled, whispered through the cracks, reminding me the storm wasn't done. I thought the worst had passed after fixing the smoke, but I was wrong. The cold wasn't just coming in anymore. It was pressing through. Every wall groaned. The roof creaked like an old ship in black water, and somewhere in that noise, the sound of water freezing inside the kettle. That's how I knew. -37. For real this time. I sat there, hands near the stove, feeling the heat lose its fight. You can smell it when warmth dies like iron and smoke. I told myself, move, now, because if I didn't, the cold would take the night, and me along with it. I pulled on my gloves and stepped outside. Snow up to my knees, wind biting, crawling under every seam. Couldn't see the trees, just white, swallowing white. Then I remembered a line from an old Viking story. If the wind can't find you, it can't kill you. I didn't smile. I just started digging. Shovel, push, pack. Again. Didn't think. Didn't count. Just kept building a wall of snow, wrapping the cabin like armor. Higher. Thicker. Until the wind began to lose its voice. Hours passed. My fingers stopped feeling. My breath turned to frost. But the sound changed. The howling outside faded into a low hum. When I stepped back inside, silence. The cabin stood still. My breath echoed in it. Not warm, not yet, but steady. And for the first time that week, I didn't shake. That night, I learned something cold and true. Sometimes what you fear the most becomes the thing that saves you. By the third night, the storm had quieted, but the cold hadn't. Silence doesn't mean safety out there. It means the cold has settled deep, steady, patient. I'd burned through almost all my wood. The last few logs hissed weakly in the stove, and the coals looked tired red, fading to black. On the table, 3 small candles. That's all I had left that could burn. I knew what that meant. If I used them tonight, there'd be nothing left for morning. But if I didn't, I might not reach morning. So I sat there thinking. And then I remembered the old Tipi logic heat moves. You just have to trap it. I grabbed a thick blanket and hung it halfway across the cabin, splitting the space in two. A smaller world to heat. Easier to keep alive. Then I found an empty tin can, placed the candles inside, and lit them. 1, 2, 3. Tiny flames trembling in the draft. They looked useless at first, too small, too fragile. But after a few minutes, I felt it. The air around me changed. It moved. Soft, circular, warm enough to touch the skin. Not comfort control. I leaned closer, feeling my breath blend with the warmth. Every flicker of those flames was a heartbeat, quiet, stubborn human. That night, I didn't chase the cold away. I simply gave the heat a place to stay. Warmth, I learned, doesn't always come from fire. Sometimes it comes from focus, from refusing to stop trying. By the fourth night, the storm came back, not loud this time, but heavier, the kind of cold that doesn't move fast, it sinks. The wind had stopped howling, yet everything around me still trembled, wood nails, even my breath. The fire from last night was gone, the coals looked dead, and the floor. The floor bit back. I could feel it through the blanket, through the boards, through my bones, a slow, creeping frost that climbed upward. I pulled the covers tighter, tried to curl smaller. Didn't help. The heat wasn't leaving through the roof, it was falling through the floor. So I moved, slow, careful, every motion stiff like cracking ice. I gathered what I had left, dry moss, pine needles, and a strip of old hide. Not much, but enough to try. 3 layers, moss below, foil in the middle, hide above. I slid inside, sealed the edges, and waited. Minutes passed. My breath steadied. The shaking stopped, not warmth, not yet, but stillness. And in that stillness, I felt something human return. Warmth isn't found. It's built 1 layer at a time. By the 5th night, the air inside the cabin turned to glass. It didn't move. It didn't breathe. Even the smoke froze halfway up the wall, hung there shimmering, then fell like dust. I exhaled once slow, watched my own breath turn into tiny crystals, drift down onto my jacket. It was beautiful and terrifying. Because that's when I knew the cold wasn't outside anymore. It was inside every breath I took. Each inhale burned like frost. Each exhale came slower. I could hear it in my own lungs, creaking like wood under weight. So I did something small, something strange. I wrapped a scarf around my face, tight, covering my nose and mouth. The fabric was damp, almost frozen. But when I breathed, I felt it catch my warmth and give it back just a little. A tiny loop of heat. A breath trap. Minutes passed. I could see the difference. The fog lingered longer before fading. My face stopped stinging. My heart slowed down. Inside that little pocket of breath, I felt something shift. The cabin was still frozen, the world still silent, but there behind the scarf, it felt like a small world of my own. A microclimate made of willpower and air. It's crazy, but I felt safe, because as long as I could see my breath, I knew I was still here, still breathing, still fighting, still alive. By the 6th night, everything that could burn had burned. The last log cracked hours ago. All that was left was a bed of gray, cold, quiet still. I stirred it once with a stick, and there, deep under the ash, a faint red glow. Tiny, weak, but alive. The kind of light you could miss if you blinked. The kind that refuses to die even when everything else gives up. I remembered something I'd once read from the old Sámi tribes. Let the fire sleep, not die. So I started covering the embers with ash, slow, gentle, like tucking in a child. The cold air hissed, but the glow stayed. Buried breathing. Not gone. Just resting. Outside, the wind scraped against the cabin walls, but I didn't feed it fear anymore. I just sat there staring at the gray mound, the heart of a fire still dreaming beneath the surface. And I thought maybe that's what survival really is. It's not about fighting the storm. It's about keeping one spark alive long enough to see morning. That night, I fell asleep beside the buried fire, not thinking of loss, just waiting. Because some things don't need to burn bright to survive. They just need to keep breathing under the ash. By the 7th morning, the storm had finally gone quiet. No more wind, no more groaning wood, just the sound of snow, settling. I pushed the door open slow. It didn't swing. It cracked like breaking ice, Light rushed in, blinding and white, bouncing off the frozen world like shattered glass. For a second, I just stood there, didn't move, didn't breathe. After 6 nights of darkness, the light felt almost unreal. It burned my eyes, and still I didn't look away. The snow glittered like 1,000 tiny mirrors, throwing sunlight back into the cabin. I could feel it, the warmth of reflection, not flame. Gentle, clean, quiet. For the first time in days, I was warm without fire. I remembered what the old ones said, the tribes who built their shelters facing southeast. Let the first light touch your spirit before it touches your skin. Back then, I thought it was poetry. Now, it felt like truth. So I sat down by the open door. Watched the light crawl across the floorboards, slow and steady. Listened to the snow melt drip by drip from the roof, a rhythm softer than any song. The storm was gone. The cold still waited outside, but it no longer felt like an enemy. It felt like a teacher. And I was still here, still breathing, still human. That night, I stopped seeing the cold as an enemy. It wasn't there to kill me. It was there to teach. And its lesson was simple. Don't fight nature. Learn to breathe with it. I thought survival was about fire, about heat, about beating the storm before it beat me. But that's not it. The truth is quieter, slower. You survive when you understand the rhythm of wind, of smoke, of yourself. The Tipi taught me that. Airflow, balance, respect. Fire rises, cold falls. Breath moves between them like a bridge. It's strange how logic can feel sacred when it keeps you alive. I didn't just keep the fire burning that week. I learned how to burn without fire. Now when I think of warmth, I don't see flames anymore. I hear breath. I feel pulse. Right here, hand on chest. Because warmth doesn't start in the stove, or the wood, or the ember. Warmth starts here.